Hello, and welcome to this panel about fact-checking in schools. My name is Sølve Karlsen, and I'm a project manager in Faktisk in Norway. Today we have gathered a good team here, being three projects that has successfully built school projects in 3 different countries. Scientists all over the world point out that importance to reach out for the youth. For some, this is strange because it seems like youth is born with the skills to maneuver between sources. Although we can see that it's a problem to reach out to the classroom because of there could be different difficulties, such as this monster of hormones gathering together towards you, or it could be getting through with school boards or simply the government. The projects we have represented here today is from Europe, North America, and South America. I've been watching them closely the last year, and they are all having some really impressive achievements. If you have the time after this panel, you should look them up. The first one out here is Nira Dinnerstad. Nira is a special project coordinator at Chicago's education program. She has planned and executed different projects addressed to teenagers and related with fact-checking and misinformation. As a way of promoting critical thinking, Nira hasn't only worked with youth, but also been a part of the team that designs initiatives to teach journalists how to fact-check or increase the quality of journalism. For those of you who have attended panels about education youth earlier, Kuraas is a well-known name. So here is Nira, the stage is yours.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nira.
Seems like we have some technical difficulties to reach out for Nira. We will come back to her and see what we can do to get her on deck. I think we'll move on then to MediaWise, representing with Alex. Alex Mahadevan. You might correct me on that one. He's a senior multimedia reporter with the MediaWise project, and at the Poynter Institute. Alex leads the training vertical for MediaWise and has personally taught thousands of students nationwide. MediaWise launched in 2018 and have so far been seen by more than 40 million youth. Impressive. The stage is yours, Alex.
Well, thank you very much, Sølve. Really happy to be here. Like you mentioned, I'm here representing MediaWise. You did a great intro there. A little bit about myself beyond what you mentioned there. I'm based here in the Poynter Institute in Florida, born and raised, worked in lots of newspapers here. Most importantly, I worked in news products and social media during the 2016 election. So I saw a lot of misinformation going around. So I've always been passionate about, one, how people consume news, and two, media literacy in general. So I oversee our training for this project, which originally started trying to reach 5 million teens with how to separate fact from fiction online. And we've gone far beyond that. Just in the last 2 years, we've reached more than 14 million teens with these media literacy lessons. That's Gen Z. We've also expanded to first-time voters in college with our MediaWise Voter Project. And some breaking news for all of you watching this, we just launched our MediaWise for Seniors project for the 50-plus demographic, teaching them media literacy ahead of the election. Super excited about that. We have veteran journalists Joan London and Christiane Amanpour, who are representing that. But we're here to talk about really the teens and fact-checking in schools. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the need, where we come in. So the need for this, there is a huge demand. The Stanford History Education Group, who we partnered with at the beginning of this project, did some research and found that nearly every teen that they talked to in the study had a real hard time determining the credibility of a website on global warming that was actually run by a fossil fuel company. You see that 96%, almost 100. And they weren't any better at checking out advertisements either. So Stanford found that more than 2/3 of students had trouble telling the difference between an ad and a real news story. So that's where we come in here at MediaWise. And so you'll see on our next slide that MediaWise, we are based, this is the Gen Z project, MediaWise, that we're talking about today, is based on really 4 pillars. I mentioned the Stanford History Education Group, who we partnered with for a great curriculum on navigating online information. A lot of what we teach comes out of that curriculum. We did in-school trainings before the coronavirus pandemic. That's something that I oversaw, and I taught thousands of kids across the country in person, now virtually. The thing that I'm really excited to talk about today, and we'll get into more, is our teen fact-checking network. We've had more than 90 teens go through this program where they fact-check the things that they see on their timeline and teach their fellow teens how to fact-check it. And we've also partnered with lots of YouTube influencers and journalists to spread the MediaWise word through our ambassador program. So instead of really going in depth on the TFCN, the Teen Fact Checking Network, here is a video of a fact check from Taya Barrett, who's one of our all-stars from the program.
Hi guys. Police brutality protests have continued across the U.S., which has also raised concerns about how it could impact the spread of the coronavirus. So I was concerned when I saw this TikTok claiming that coronavirus testing centers had been shut down to punish protesters in LA. For this fact check, I went with a classic keyword search. LA closing testing centers brought up multiple articles, including this one from a local TV station. And according to the article, all coronavirus testing centers closed on Saturday because of safety concerns from the George Floyd protests. But there was no mention that this was to punish protesters. However, I was curious when testing would be available again. Going back to my original Google search, I found that updates were being posted to the county's Twitter page. Sites have opened back up, others are working on modified hours, and it is up to each site individually whether they think it is safe to open. So this is not legit. Remember to do a keyword search before you share anything, especially as information is quickly unfolding.
So that is a great example of our Teen Fact Checking Network, and you see that poll at the end there. The poll about whether they'd fact check their own social media feeds. We regularly get 75, 80%, 90% of people responding to that poll and saying, "Hey, I watched this. I'm going to fact check the things I see online." So like I mentioned, the ambassadors, here's a quick PSA we put together right at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic.
If you want to help someone during this incredibly difficult time, you can start right now.
Stop spreading misinformation.
Stop spreading misinformation.
Stop spreading misinformation.
Stop spreading misinformation.
Stop spreading misinformation. Stop spreading misinformation.
Stop spreading misinformation.
Stop spreading misinformation.
So you can see that we have a really diverse set of ambassadors that help us reach lots of different demographics with everything that we'll talk about today. Quickly into what we teach. Again, the Stanford History Education Group put together some great questions that we base a lot of what we talk about on. We asked who's behind the information, what's the evidence, and what are other sources saying? And we teach lots of techniques and tips that are based off of these questions. Just a little taste, we teach lateral reading, which is basically opening up a new tab, doing a keyword search, and finding out more about the source of the information you're seeing. We teach reverse image searches, which really gets the teens fired up. It's a really important tool in fact checking. Spotting bots and deepfakes, really looking ahead in the world of misinformation, and practicing click restraint, teaching our teens how Google works, how search engines work. So that's just a little taste of MediaWise. And like I said, Sølve, I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you, Alex. That is really interesting, and I've also been looking at your results so far, and it's really interesting to see and learn from. I think the next one up is Maria Samuelsen, which is also my colleague. She's a teacher and has worked at the school program TANK for the last year. She has a special interest for technology and youth communication online, and has been a central developer of this website for this project. Maria has trained teachers and youth, and together with teachers, she has developed useful tools for the classroom. Welcome, Maria, and go on.
Hi, and thank you for having me. My name is Maria Samuelsen, and I work as a teacher at the Norwegian fact-checking organization Faktisk. The last year, I worked with 2 other teachers, Sølve being one of them, on establishing our school project, TANK. We have developed learning resources evolving around the fact-checking genre, specifically on critical thinking in school, and named our project thereafter. TANK means think in English, because that's what you need to do. As you can see on my slide, I have titled this contribution Enabling Teachers to Bring Fact-Checking into Norwegian Classrooms. This is because we base our work on the premise that even though schools appreciate having professionals coming in and talking about this intriguing subject that disinformation is, we also need teachers to build the skills required to fight disinformation. We need everyone to be fact-checkers. So let me tell you about some of the work TANK has done since last August. On the next slide. Thank you. Trying and failing and trying again and succeeding in some. During the establishment of our project, the focus has been threefold: to produce and test instructions and learning resources, to help build an academic community where teachers and librarians would want to contribute, and to do courses and workshops in schools and libraries. We decided early on that we would just jump into it, and we quickly started to communicate the resources with teachers. This way we could test out hunches and ideas and adapt as we go. Our experience is that open questions work very well when teachers and students are finding facts on their own, and we try not to direct the conversation towards a given conclusion. This goes hand in hand with illustrative examples and the latest hot source tips. There is a notable gap between young people's media use and how much experience adults have with this media use. While some educators struggle to understand the unspoken rules of Instagram, others have a vast amount of knowledge on conspiracy forums. With our work, we seek to build a bridge over this gap. 30% of Norwegian teenagers uses a search engine to check up on a suspicion of disinformation. This is a result from a survey made by the Norwegian Media Authority, and the question asked was, what do you do when you encounter fake news? Of the 3,395 asked, 30% said they would search it up. And this finding addresses an important aspect of teaching fact-checking to youths. Even though Google's indexing magic is at our fingertips, youths don't necessarily know how to use this technology. According to Google Trends, Google is a more popular search term than, for example, 5G. Even though they use Google all the time, they don't necessarily recognize it as a research tool. And I have some tips I want to share with people entering classrooms and sharing their experience. Try to use crisp examples. You need examples when teaching concepts. And if you're talking about memes, show some memes. If you're talking about article, show the article. And the fresher these examples are, the more intriguing they will be for the students. You'll also want to involve the students actively. Don't just talk, do. Find fun games or challenging exercises and make sure the students get to talk and contribute a lot. And also don't be afraid to visit the surroundings. In addition to using screenshots, it can be really informative to sort of visit this information where you originally found it, in its native surroundings, so to speak. And this is a quote from one of our teachers we have collaborated with. Even with established facts, you have to talk about why they are established facts. One thing is to teach students what steps to take when checking claims they come across, but it is a whole other matter to help them balance between what to question and what they can trust. Belief in conspiracy theories stems from an ability to be skeptical towards established facts, a skill we seek to elicit in our students. But we also need to teach them how to both look for and validate trustworthy information, both online as well as in conversation, and to trust their own ability to make decisions, instead of outsourcing that process to people they look up to. I recommend checking out both MediaWise and Chicuado on their Instagrams, because the work they're sharing there is communicating these skills so well. There is still so much to be done with bringing fact-checking into schools, and I hope that our audience finds some motivation to start or to continue to work with schools and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I also started the project together with Maria, and this last year has been quite a journey. And it's really interesting to see the other projects around the world working. And as we started last August, Chicuado was one of the first we were told about. Unfortunately, we have some problems with the connection to Argentina, but I hope we'll get them through, because it's really interesting how they have worked around the country. Nir, are you with me?
I'm here. Do you listen to me?
Yes, I hear you. Okay, then you can come with your presentation. The stage is yours.
Okay. Now the connection. Into 14.
Well, as being a teacher for 14 years, I know that the technique always fails us. So, of course, the technique was good before we started, but it doesn't seem to work right now. We'll just go further to the panel and hope we'll get Nir with us as soon as possible. All of you who joins us today has a project that started one day at scratch, and I wanted to start with you in MediaWise. What was the start for MediaWise, and have you evolved the idea? Have you changed from the start, or do you have still the idea that you started with?
Well, for the latter question, no. I mean, it's all teaching teens how to separate fact from fiction online, at least for our Gen Z project. That remains the foundation. As far as the start of it, I can't speak in real specifics, because I've been with the program for a year, which for a startup feels like 20 years. But so I can't speak in specifics, but I will say that the Poynter Institute, while many may know of it as, you know, an amazing school for journalists, what they might not know is we are really at the crossroads of democracy here. It's beyond just journalism. We sit between policymakers, news consumers, and yes, journalists. And a big part of that is fact checking. You know, my colleagues at PolitiFact really have been great about that. So MediaWise really fit in perfectly here at Poynter, and I think that was part of the genesis for this. But it started, you know, I will say it started a small program, and while our team remains relatively small but mighty, I think we have just sort of exploded. I mentioned earlier about how we're reaching different demographics. We have our team fact checking network has done more than 400 fact checks. So I think we've grown a lot in size and reach, but the foundation is still there.
We are also really impressed for you have shown us a lot of techniques, easy ones, small, to the point techniques. How do you think when you start to make these techniques?
Well, really, the genesis of our curriculum and of what we teach is thinking like a fact checker. So I brought up PolitiFact. So the way that when we start thinking about techniques, we use the techniques that they would use as they're fact checking any political claim. Of course, we go really beyond politics. We're fact checking a lot of pop culture stuff, really a strong focus on coronavirus right now. But we try to encourage the teens to think like fact checkers, and that means using the tools that fact checkers use, whether that is, something from a simple Google search and learning to go beyond that first page of Google to identifying legitimate sources, using Wikipedia responsibly, to, like I mentioned at the beginning, something that always really excites the teens and really gets people going when I do, when I used to do in-person trainings, is reverse image searches and reverse, video searches. So our toolbox is really the same as any fact checker, and that really informs how we teach teens how to separate fact from fiction and what they see online.
Can't you, Alex, take us back from before the coronavirus? We have been talking earlier, and you gave me a short picture of how it looks like when MediaWise comes to a school or to an auditorium. How do you meet that? What are you meeting there? How does it look like when MediaWise is entering a school?
So it really it has really usually started from the librarians. MediaWise, we love our librarians. They usually reach out to us. We've done outreach to them, and they say, hey, our school would love to have you come in. And usually it's a large auditorium of students. We do about an hour presentation, leaving about a half hour for question and answer. In that time, we teach all of the tools that I talked about using the most recent examples that we can find. It would, of course, if we could travel and teach right now, there are lots of examples that we'd be including in our presentations, from coronavirus to the protests that are happening. And we really walk them through how we do our fact checking, how our Teen Fact Checking Network does their fact checking, and leaving them. We only have about an hour and a half usually in front of between 100 to thousands of students. But our goal and what we've seen in follow-up surveys is that a great many of those students come away with, they come away as better digital citizens and less likely to share suspect things they see on their timelines.
But then the coronavirus hit us, and what happens to MediaWise then?
So it's funny. We actually, I was doing a first-time voter. I mentioned the MediaWise Voter Project earlier. I was doing a presentation for first-time voters in New York City on March 5th. So what became, only days later we found out, was the hotspot of coronavirus infections in the U.S. So as you can guess, our in-person trainings really came to a screeching halt. Fortunately, we had a lot to work on in terms of updating our curriculum, expanding our MediaWise Voter Project, and then eventually starting to work on our curriculum for our MediaWise for Seniors project, which is supported by AARP and Facebook. And so we've had a lot of administrative stuff to work on, but we've also done a lot of virtual trainings through that MediaWise Voter Project. And it's really given us time to focus on our Teen Fact Checking Network and really make sure we are trying to fact check as many coronavirus claims as we possibly can. And I think that number is more than 80 right now. So we've really been able to hyper-focus on the actual fact-checking in our Teen Fact-Checking Network.
I also talked with you earlier. You told that after the coronavirus, these ambassadors for you, or these youth fact-checkers, they actually worked harder and produced more fact-checks.
Yes, because, before, when we were fact-checking more pop culture, less timely types of claims, it could take a week, maybe longer, to go through what is a very rigorous editing process for us. I worked across newsrooms, and I hadn't really seen as rigorous of an editing process that these teen fact checkers go through. So that was the adjustment, was trying to turn some of these coronavirus stories around, because as you've probably heard, I mean, has anyone's heard, things change daily, hourly, sometimes by the minute, in terms of regulations, numbers, etc. So they are working harder, they're producing way more fact checks, and they're turning them around quicker. It is amazing to watch these students just really immerse themselves in the fact checking and turn things so quickly.
But do they work, these youth fact checkers?
So when you what can you expand on that? What do you mean by do they work?
Yeah, because often it's difficult to reach out to the youth because you are adult, you are maybe too grown up in language, and then you suddenly comes with all these youth doing the fact check. As a teacher for 14 years, I assume that these youth fact checkers probably work better than any journalist.
Oh, absolutely. I can say, as someone who has traveled to schools and tried to dab in front of lots of middle schoolers, that they don't always take me seriously. But when they have their peers fact checking the things that they see on the social media that they're on, it has a much bigger impact. Like I mentioned, the poll at the end of our Instagram fact checks shows a huge efficacy in how these fact checks are working. And it's because it is for teens, it's by teens, and it's the things that they see on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. Yeah.
Maria, could you bring in? You have been working a year with the school project in Norway, and from the start, how has it developed?
Well, it started as a combination of Faktisk getting a lot of requests from schools and libraries, and also we this August, we are implementing a new curriculum in Norwegian schools, where critical thinking plays a really huge part. So when we started in August, that was kind of the bottom line for our work, bringing critical thinking and the tools and knowledge from the fact-checking world into Norwegian classrooms. And as we are teachers, all of us that works on this project, we very quickly decided that we would try to produce something that would involve the teachers, not just going into classrooms, but making activities and describing stuff you could do in a classroom that would rehearse these sort of skills. And as the year went by, we haven't diverged from that exactly, but we also see that the need for having expertise and inspiration in school is maybe bigger than we expected.
But some says that the teachers are so busy and they don't want to. How are you welcomed into the classroom or cooperating with the teachers?
We are both teachers and librarians, and schools in general are surprisingly welcome and enthusiastic, and they really want to try it out. And we don't meet any resistance at all, really, when we're going into schools. But we're going into with an open mind. We're just like trying things out, having a close dialogue with the teachers. So a very warm welcome, I would say, and a wanted one. But I think that's closely related to the fact that these new curriculums are being introduced this August, and critical thinking playing such a major part of it.
But if you could give any advice to other school projects around the world, how can you reach out to the classroom or to the teacher? How can you use the teachers?
well, any way you can imagine. Use your network. That's what if you have a network of teachers, use that. If you know one teacher, use that teacher's network to reach out. Go to schools, send an email, or go to the reception and say, hi, we would want to do this. My impression is that this is such an important skill, and teachers recognize it, and schools recognize it, and libraries recognize it, that you won't be shown the door if you come and say, hi, we have these skills we could rehearse.
Alex, we have to we admire really your lateral reading as a concept. Is this can you explain a little more? You talked a little bit about it during your presentation, but can you talk us through the process of lateral reading?
So lateral reading, for me, right away, it was a little difficult for me to understand that people didn't already investigate the information that they saw this way, because as a journalist for more than a decade, the first thing I do when I see something online is I open up a new tab, do a Google search, find out what's up with this think tank, who's on the board of this think tank. Then I Google who that board member is, who have they donated money to, I mean, I open lots and lots of tabs, and I'm sure everyone on this panel can attest to having lots of tabs open at all times. And unfortunately, teens, even though they are digital natives and they grew up with iPads in their hands, they don't really navigate the internet in that same way. You've seen how easy it is to make a web page nowadays. I could throw one together in probably half a day that would look as good as anyone that you would see. And 6-7 years ago, that was not as possible. So teens see a website, they might see a really slick logo and everything looks really nice, and they will stay on that website and scroll and scroll and scroll and read vertically, and then close that tab and go away and say, everything that I saw on that website, must be true. So really we're trying to teach that you should start reading vertically, but then you need to start opening up more tabs, doing searches like I just mentioned before. And the idea is you're reading across. You're reading laterally across those tabs to find out more about who posted what you're seeing, who created that website, who's on the board of that think tank, etc. So it is trying to create, I think, habits that go beyond just fact-checking what they see online. I think it makes you, for them, it makes them a better student. I think it makes you a better citizen if you just take the time to read laterally when you see something.
Really good one. We have used that a lot in Norway, and it really works for the students too. Maria, can you tell a little bit about? We have made different kind of teaching resources for students and teachers. Can you tell a little about what we have made and how do the teacher use it?
Okay, so we made learning resources mainly in form of instructions, like sort of a recipe for what you do in the classroom. And these learning resources can be for 15 minutes exercise, a 15 minutes exercise. It can be for a 30-minute classroom session, or whatever we put together. And we reached out to to teachers in our network, and we said, hey, could you test this out with your class? See what works, see what doesn't. And we adapted the resources accordingly after the teachers had tested it out. So what changed what changed while we worked, I think, was mainly sorry.
You made, for example, this teaching. What kind of topics did you bring along, and and what do the teachers want to teach in the classroom? Because for many who are going to fact check or bringing fact checkers into the classroom, you might want to have the full package. You want to have everything, but you have to start one place. So where did you start in Norway?
Well, I think we started with what we already knew. I'm guessing. So there's just this vast amount, as you say, this vast amount of subjects to choose between. We just, I think we started with the we categorized it into disinformation, what is fact checking, what are algorithms, and how do they affect what we see on the internet. But if you're working in a classroom and you're having a teacher doing it, I think the most important part is having being comfortable with the subject that you're teaching. You can't go into a classroom and being unsure about something, because your students will know. They're digital natives, as Alex says, and some of them, even though not everyone does lateral reading on a regular basis, some do. And I think especially when it comes to disinformation and just information on the internet in general, some teachers might be afraid to bring that up in order to, be not necessarily outsmarted, but knowing less than the students.
I wonder, Alex, if you in MediaWise experience that sometimes you get this, you have the bias, you're the leftist and stuff like that. How do you answer those questions when you arrive schools or students or maybe from parents?
Yeah, I've been fortunate since I've been with the program. I haven't really run into that too much. I make very clear from the beginning of the presentation that I give, or virtual, in person, or otherwise, that MediaWise is a nonprofit, non-political, non-partisan project. And generally people will understand that once we go through our different examples that we walk them through, that we are very focused on remaining balanced and unbiased, as really any fact checkers are. So I think, and I keep bringing up PolitiFact, but we really look to PolitiFact as sort of a guiding light, and really the fact-checking community in general in maintaining that nonpartisan focus. So generally, when I do get those types of questions, which is usually like either anonymously in surveys or maybe anonymously in a chat, just reminding them that facts are facts, and when we're fact checking something, no biases come in, just as if when I was a reporter, when I was reporting something, and sort of redirecting them and explaining how we do a fact check. So I think, not to keep rambling, but I think one really important thing is just being extremely transparent. And I think the IFCN and all the signatories, that's a real important part of this industry, is transparency, and transparency in funding, transparency in the process, transparency throughout everything usually helps put out those little fires when we get them.
Yeah, I actually got the questions here from the audience, and it's an interesting question I've been thinking about, and we have discussed before. Actually, Alex, is from Patrick Sakarsevsky. How do you recruit teen fact checkers, and how do you motivate them to regular work?
Well, we put out a call across social media where we know they will see it, and we generally get a lot of interest. So we put out a call on social media, and also, like I've mentioned, I've been to dozens of schools across the U.S. So we have a really great network of contacts that we can reach out to and say, hey, do you have any students that would be interested in this? Generally, it is, it's generally self-selection. A lot of the students that are interested are going to be the ones who are extremely motivated to do this. Even some of the ones that just come on for the Amazon gift card, that's how we compensate the students with an Amazon gift card that they can then spend in their own way. But even the ones that seem to come on just for that, summer money or whatever, once they start doing the fact checking, and once they, I think they're able to sort of impress their friends with something like a reverse image search and then say, hey, Tommy, you posted this and it wasn't actually legit. I think that in and of itself is a real motivating factor. So once they get into that fact checking process and learn how, really not to sound like a nerd or anything, how cool it is, I think that motivates them as well.
Do they have to be quite qualified to have a qualifying test or something to be a part of the team, or do you just recruit them?
Yeah, we do have an application process, and we want to make sure, because I mentioned the rigorous editing process that they go through. Our fact checks are really Instagram focused right now, which is, it has its own production values and production system. And so we want to make sure that they are able to, navigate Instagram, that they're creative with the Instagram stories that they post. So there is a screening process to make sure they have some base knowledge, but it is not a hugely high bar, because we want to get a variety of students from all walks of life, across demographics. So really they come in with a base knowledge, but they learn as they go, because at its heart, obviously we want the Teen Fact Checking Network to make a real impact in teaching teens who see them not to share things that are false. But it's also a learning experience and a way to teach these teens that are part of the Teen Fact Checking Network.
Just a short question: how long time will these teens join this youth fact checking? Like for a year, 2 years?
It really depends. So generally, these teen fact checking rounds, is what we call them, last about 12 to 15 weeks. Coronavirus has thrown a wrench into that, because obviously that has made it very difficult to onboard an entirely new group of students. But fortunately, our core students of about 20 or so remained on, and these are the most active students. The rounds last, like I said, 12 to 15 weeks, but we have lots and lots of students who say, hey, I want to do this again. They sign up for multiple rounds. We've had students who have been doing this a year at this point or longer.
I see. We have to adapt. Okay, yes. I have another question for you, Marie, from the audience. 30%. It's from Tanishri Matira. 30% of the teenagers use a search engine for disinformation. Did you find instances where the search engines were returning false information, like searching for flat Earth will return flat Earth conspi?
Well, not from the survey, as I'm aware of at this point, but we had one of the teachers we collaborated with actually experience this in the classroom. While doing one of our resources, where it wasn't the search terms that the students were supposed to search for, but as when you're in a classroom, stuff happens, and the students just go their own way. And one of them found that it came into a flat Earth conspiracy forum and went quiet for a while. So we had to adapt the learning resource accordingly so that the teacher could be prepared for it.
Yeah, but when you work with teachers, you did mention earlier that some of the teachers were afraid of getting caught by the students didn't know enough about this topic, or maybe For some of the teachers we met, I remember he said that they were afraid of telling that this is far right or this and that. Have you given this a thought about how to learn teachers how to meet these kind of edgy humor or connecting topics?
Like how to deal with dank memes? Well,
for example, yeah.
It's a matter of experience. We see that when we go into schools and have courses and workshops with teachers and librarians, they say that they might not feel super safe afterwards, they're a step closer to feeling comfortable with teaching this. But you just have to throw yourself into it. You have to do it. That's the only way to become comfortable with it. It's the same for maybe for journalists that have never entered a classroom or haven't been in a classroom teaching and educating. When you do the first time you do it, it's okay. You just when the discussions you're having with students about hard topics, like for example dank memes or this conspiracy theories of different kinds, as long as you're open and ask them questions and make them sort of be this Socratic method where you're luring them into a sort of a critical mindset, that's the best way to deal with it.
Yeah. Another question from the audience, Alex, this is for you, from Marinette Retona. Can you give us a tip on how we can continue our training when we cannot do it face-to-face interaction, but also considering that it potential could be some problems with the internet connection?
It's a great question. But first, I want to say I'm really glad that we got the phrase dank memes onto a global fact panel, something I'm very happy to hear. That is a good question. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a really great answer for it. I'll do my best. So I think, like a lot of people, we are using Zoom, has a lot of capabilities to adapt our virtual training. We have a really great network of educators just from the Poynter Institute. So I've been reaching out for tips from them. Generally, it's been using like Zoom or Skype to do some of these trainings online and trying to make them a little bit more digitally interactive through polls or quizzes. We do have a problem here in rural America with some internet dead zones and internet deserts. I can't really think of anything very specific, but you have to get creative. This could be teaching through maybe an email newsletter. Email is something that doesn't require as much bandwidth, so that's something you could do, like a whole series of email newsletters to students or teachers who sign up for that, and they can sign their students up. SMS text messaging. This is something that the capabilities in mass SMS have come a real long way in the last few years. This is something I could say requires, like I mentioned, a little bit less bandwidth. You could do a series of SMS-based media literacy lessons, text back 1 if this is false, 2 if this is true, and have them fact check that way. Those would be my 2 suggestions for dealing with internet connectivity problems. But it's really trying to be creative and adapt. I think everyone across really any industry worldwide is dealing with this right now. So just trying to get creative with it.
Yeah, we all get creative when we have problems. I have a question here, which is for both of you. I maybe start with you, Maria. How can media literacy and education on facts work in situations where the curriculum is more rigid and does not easily adopt new info? This could be like, for example, in a lot of developing countries. How can we work around these struggles?
Well, I don't have any experience working with those limitations. I'm feeling very privileged because the Norwegian curriculum is very open in that way. but some of the exercises that we do are not necessarily dependent on examples. They are more like critical thinking rehearsal, more oriented towards logic, perhaps. Like
could you give a concrete example on that?
like for example, when you have a set of claims and do rehearse like a classroom plural exercise where you just make everyone decide true or false. This is one way to work with this subject without kind of breaking any rules, depending on what claims you make, but you still get to rehearse in the skill set of taking a stance. Is this claim true or false?
Yeah. Alex, can you fill in here? How can we work around the curriculums?
So we are over here also very, very privileged in that we haven't had too many issues with that. I will say, in terms of places where the curriculum is more rigid, set in stone, there have always been examples of misinformation across all disciplines, from history to science to mathematics. So, for example, teaching fact-checking in a history class. Did George Washington, our first president, actually have wooden teeth? So you can sort of teach around the curriculum. That's it's super basic. I know, just for like our younger audience. But I think, like you mentioned, I mean, it's really teaching the Socratic method and teaching logic and trying to adapt that for the curriculum already in place. And I think there are always places for that where you can sneak that in.
And also, if I might jump in, the point with talking about why established facts are established, like taking the curriculum that you already have and trying to work your way through it, and doubting every premise and doubting every kind of asserting sentence that is made is, I think, in itself healthy exercise.
Yeah, that also what you brought up in the presentation from the teacher we have worked with, that we can start actually with being inside the curriculum. We have another question here from Marinette Retuna for Alex. You mentioned in the presentation about this fact-checking for seniors. What is the major difference between your training curriculum for teens and for seniors?
So when we're adapting that training for older Americans, the foundation is still there. I keep bringing up the foundation. Those 3 questions from the Stanford History Education Group asking, who's behind the information, what is the evidence, and what are other sources saying for what you see. The foundation of the curriculum really stays the same, and that's for really any demographic. But you do have to understand, with older Americans, they grew up in a time when we didn't have all of the different channels of information coming at us constantly, nonstop. You read the paper in the morning, and then you watch the evening news. So, this is a demographic that is really trying to adapt and find out what sources are trustworthy. So we really focus on trying to develop ways to find out whether a source is trustworthy. And then really it's down to technology preferences. For example, our younger students, they generally use a Google search for everything, but older Americans might use a variety of different search engines, from Bing to Yahoo to AOL. So really trying to be cognizant of the different, not technological skill, but the technological preferences of these different demographics.
Yeah. One question for Maria here. What is the benefits of having teachers working in the project? Can you give us some?
Well, I'm not really sure if that's fair because I'm a teacher myself, and I have worked as a teacher for 6 years. So I might just throw that question to Alex. Alex, what's your experience with working with teachers?
Well, I can definitely say of all the teachers that I've worked with, they're very happy for this project because they haven't seen something like this in the curriculum that they're teaching. And we've seen over the last half decade or more the importance of being able to identify misinformation. And so I think this is sort of like a glaring demand. So teachers are definitely happy to have this. But in terms of the importance of having teachers on board, they can really tailor these lessons in a way that reaches the students that they know, whether they're the students in their own classrooms or across their school districts. So they are the boots on the ground. They're the ones with that institutional knowledge of how to fit in lessons about media literacy. So teachers are just absolutely crucial for teaching media literacy to this age group.
Okay, let me ask another question for you. But Maria, as a teacher, you have now worked close to journalists that have last year. And what have you learned from working close to journalists as a teacher?
Well, I've learned a lot, and I can't mention all of it. But one thing that comes to mind when you ask is that as a teacher, you tend to maybe fall a little bit in love in what's the English word for it? Like this certain way of doing things, these to-do lists, checklists. If you're writing a genre, you just do this and this and this, and then you have your finished product. It's easy to work with as a student, and it's easy to sort of grade as a teacher. But working with journalists, and especially the fact checkers here at Faktisk, has made me very aware that you don't have that standard way. You might use many of the same tools every time, but there's no standard permutation. There's no certain way of searching or reading that source or talking to that person. You just have to be kind of, and that's the thing about critical thinking, though, and that's an important point that Nira had, that I'm so sorry that she didn't get to make in this panel. Is that critical thinking is fact checking in itself is just a tool for one of many tools, actually, for reaching critical thinking. It's not like it's yeah. That's my most important experience, I think.
Alex, you're going towards a new election this fall, and as a school project, how do you embrace?
So, like I mentioned, we are a nonpartisan project, and so getting into fact-checking things regarding the election and politics, we need to be very careful about what we do. But over the last, I want to say almost 6 months, we have gone from not fact-checking really anything political to fact-checking lots of political statements from politicians, candidates, etc. So we're doing more fact-checking on what candidates say and what people, what regular people are making claims about candidates. So we're doing that as part of our MediaWise voter project, which I'm extremely excited about. We are reaching first-time voters with lessons on how to vote, how to register to vote, and then our classic fact-checking and identifying misinformation lessons. So we're really trying to adapt everything we do to this election cycle. We're not getting much sleep, and I don't I don't expect to get much sleep until November. Yeah, it's an exciting time, but we are adapting to that as we speak.
We will for sure follow you closely and learn from you. And this is also a really great thing to be together and see that although we are in different countries, we have different curriculums, it's still much we can learn from each other. Too bad we didn't manage to get Nero with us, but I will encourage everyone to go to EduCheckMap to check out different school projects around the world. I will thank you to Alex, and thank you to Maria, and thank you everyone following us, and have a nice day wherever you are.